So March was a so-so reading month. I only read 6 books, which is not the best I've ever done. But aside from one of them, I rated everything 4 stars or higher, which is a win in my opinion. So once again, we have another great reading month ratings wise. February, we love you, but you weren't so hot in terms of good books. January and March have come through for me, with the majority of my reads being 4 stars. And we did have a 5 in here. It was like a 4.5 that I rounded up. But I take what I can get on this channel when I'm a fussy bitch and I don't like anything. I'm gonna be honest though, I did read more than the books you're gonna see in this video. I'm just not telling you what those books are yet. So now that you know that, it is time for some completely inaccurate statistics that do not represent the totality of what I read in the month of March. I allegedly read 6 books, which added up to a total of 2,517 pages and broke down to an average of 81 pages per day. For the star ratings, I had just 1 3-star, 4 4-stars, and 1 5, which broke down to a very nice average of 4 stars per book. For the demographics, I read 2 young adult books, 1 new adult, and 3 adult. For the formats, I read 5 standardly formatted novels and I listened to 1 audiobook. For the genres, I read 2 fantasy books, 1 fantasy romance, 1 horror, 1 science fiction, and 1 thriller. And finally, for the places where I sourced these books from, 5 of them were from my own TBR that existed prior to the start of 2025, and 1 of them was a library book, and only 1 of the 6 books that I read was on my March TBR, so someone has some catching up to do. But the first book that I completed in March was indeed the one that was on my March TBR, and that is Valor by Gwynne. Just like last month, we are starting off with the hit of the month as well, because this is the book that I gave 5 stars to. I feel like every book I read in this series, I'm becoming more endeared and connected to it. I'm becoming more emotionally invested. So it's only onwards and upwards from here, but also I think emotionally it's actually going to be a very rapidly declining slope where I'm going to be slipping and like trying to get some grip as I plunge into emotional destruction. So yay me. But if you guys don't know, this is the 2nd book in the Faithful and the Fallen series by Gwynne. It is a kind of military style fantasy series. It's kind of like if Robin Hobb and George R.R. Martin had a baby. It has this like military political focus, but is a little bit more character driven, and we're really like connecting more with our character perspectives than we do in Game of Thrones. It is multi-perspective. We have tons of characters, but we are predominantly following a character called Corbin. Like, he is the one that we keep coming back to, and he has been raised as the son of a blacksmith. We're following him from his mid-teenage years, completes his warrior training to become a man, and we're also following a host of different characters, some in different parts of the world, some more closely surrounding Corbin. But the plot of this one is essentially following a prophecy that declares that there is going to be an avatar for light called the Bright Star and an avatar for dark called the Black Sun, and all of the nations and all of the citizens of the world are going to rally behind one or the other of them. Now, what we're trying to do in this series is figure out who the Bright Star and the Black Sun are. Obviously, we want to align ourselves as readers with the Bright Star, but we have some questionable morality in here. We have some red herrings, I believe, thrown in. And in the first book in this series, we're really just getting to know everybody pretty much at peacetime. A key part of this prophecy is that you will know when the Bright Star and the Black Sun are about to emerge, because there will be all of these signs like white worms. These like 7 relics are going to stir and find their ways into the hands of men again. In book 1, this is just starting to happen. We're seeing these early signs and the world starts to destabilize. And in book 2 is where the action begins and where the story really begins. We are following a lot of the same characters that we followed in book 1, but we also have a handful of perspectives that are new to book 2, including some of the giants of the world, because the premise of this series is that there was a war between giants and men. It has been dormant for a very long time, but that war is also starting to wake up amidst all of this other stuff. And up until this point, we didn't really know what kind of affiliation the giants had, and we learned quite a lot more about them in this one. We also start to question some of our characters, some of their motives, and they start to question their own motives as well. Meanwhile, our main-ish character of Corbin is really starting to build build more connections, come into himself as a man, because realistically before he was only a man in age, not in any real experience, and he is growing and you're constantly getting endeared to him as the story continues. There are also characters in here that I love to hate that get more and more heinous as the book goes on, and this one did draw a tear or two from me. I can't lie, I cried twice at the end, which is why I ended up rating this one so highly. There are other reasons, of course. I really like John Gwynne's world building, and I really like this complex world. I really like that he's keeping me guessing at this point, trying to figure out who these key players are and what consequences we're going to have for the actions of characters in here, how one person's actions have a knock-on effect on what happens to other characters, and which characters are ultimately going to side with the light versus the dark and vice versa, because at this point we do have a lot of people teetering all over the place where their allegiance is seemingly unclear or subject to change in the future, especially after the events of this book. We had a lot of harrowing things happen in here as well. Some of my favorite characters, one in particular who is known for his loyalty and his honor for standing up for people who are less fortunate than him and takes up a protector role, really went through it in this book, and I went through it with him. So I feel like John Gwynne's ability to impact me emotionally while weaving this intricate political and military focused plot is what is really going to potentially make this one of my favorite series. I'm very, very excited to get into book 3 as well, because I know that that is the fan favorite, and it's called Ruin. I've heard it's going to ruin me, and I am not ready. The next book that I finished was This Woven Kingdom by Tahara Murphy. This one was for Shelve It or Scrap It, and this is one of those books that I feel like I've been putting off for quite some time because I feel like I'm going to enjoy it, and I never let myself read the things I think I'm going to enjoy, and I was right about this one. It was not the perfect book by any means, and for a lot of this book I was very unsure about how I was going to rate it, but the last 20% in here was so good. So this one is a very classic young adult fantasy romance story that I am very familiar with through years and years of kind of reading the genre, where we are following the lost heir to a kingdom, a Jinn kingdom specifically in this instance, and the crown prince who falls in love with her. So our main character Eliza in here is this lost heir, but she's just trying to survive at this point. She is currently a servant in a human household. She is also making dresses on the side to try and make some coin for herself for a little bit of security. She is living in a world where the Jinn are looked down upon. They have seemingly gained equality over the last few years, but that is mainly a ruse. They don't actually have true equality to humans, and we are following our human crown prince who has been away for a long time, and his grandfather has called him back to the capital city because it is time for him to actually start training to properly take over this kingdom when his grandfather passes away. So one day Eliza is taking a dress to a client and she is accosted by this street thief. Unbeknownst to her, the crown prince is watching this from the shadows, and he sees Eliza fight this boy off and kind of leave him in the gutter. When the prince can't get any answers from the boy, he starts to pursue Eliza a little bit more closely himself, and inexplicably is more and more drawn towards her, which becomes even more complicated when he finds out who she actually is, and he has to decide whether he is going to try and protect her against the wishes of his family, or whether he is going to allow her to be taken as this like potentially threatening heir to his kingdom. So the thing that I really liked about this, first off, was the writing style. It reminded me a little bit of Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor, which, to be fair, I read that years and years ago. So while I remember that writing style is beautiful, lyrical, and poetical, I don't remember the specifics of it, but I do know that reading this and the lush lyrical prose in here really reminded me of the atmosphere created in Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. Something really interesting about this that I wasn't sure about to start off with that I ended up really loving is how the dialogue in here is so reminiscent of classics. Like, it reminded me a lot of Wuthering Heights, where we have these really dramatic back and forth between the characters. It took me by surprise a little bit because at the start of the book, Eliza is warned not to speak so much because she speaks too eloquently to be a servant. But as she comes into contact with the prince and she speaks more and more, it becomes this like really sophisticated, like biting, melodramatic rapport between them, which really ramps up this romantic tension. Now, despite all of that, I am not sold on the prince in this story being the love interest. He has a lot of privilege that he needs to question that keeps popping out left, right, and center throughout many of his scenes in in this book. Because of that, the romance, like, I wasn't sold on it, and it took such a long time for this book to become a little bit more plot focused. But the last 20% introduced a character that I absolutely loved, and also really ramped up that plot to a place where I'm now very excited for book 2. And I had to beg, well, I was going to say I had to beg, borrow and steal to get a copy of book 2 in this edition. I didn't, but I did have to beg on Instagram, as somebody did come through for me, and then I've now ordered book 3. So yeah, you could say that I enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. Another hit for me, this one was a little bit more unexpected because I don't recall anybody really talking about this, but this was The Whisper in Dark by Kelly Andrew. This one is the Illumicrate edition, and I have flipped the dust jacket round. But this one has a like dark academia element to it, and it also has a bit of a gothic atmosphere, as well as kind of a murder mystery going on. Like, there are people potentially being murdered, there are dead people, but it doesn't have like a murder mystery kind of formula or structure, if that makes sense. But in this one, we are following a deaf girl called Delaney who wants to go to university, and so she applies to this scholarship where if you pass, you don't get to choose where you go. The testing process decides what the best fit for you would be, and you have to go there. So she ends up going to this school that specializes in doors between dimensions and how to open them, how to travel through them. And as soon as she arrives, she meets a pretentious upperclassman called Colton who seems to despise her, and those two end up in a begrudging alliance when one of their classmates or one of the other students of this university dies in a particularly horrific manner. So one of the things that this establishes straight away that I am a sucker for is the he fell first trope. So I'm talking about when the male love interest specifically has been pining for the female main character for years and years, and she does not have a clue. So right at the beginning, in the first or second chapter of this book, we discover that Colton drowned when he was a kid. He fell into a lake when he was playing ice hockey with his brother, and it was Delaney who found him on the shore of this lake. Now, she has no recollection of this. Like, she knows it happened, but she doesn't know it was him because she was like quite a small child at the time. But he has never forgotten, and as soon as he sees her in this university, he knows exactly who she is and cannot help being inexplicably drawn to her, even though he has been explicitly ordered to stay away from her. We also have the gothic atmosphere in here, which really just amplifies the pining and the longing, which are honestly my favorite elements of a romance. We have not necessarily this forbidden element, but the fact that Colton is kind of trying his best to stay away from Delaney. In my opinion, he doesn't try very hard, but he has been ordered to stay away from her, so a lot of this is kind of him resisting his urges when they apply to her. And then on top of that, we also have this supernatural plot. It is set in our world, but we do have these doors between dimensions, and I really enjoyed exploring those dimensions a little bit and these subtle differences between realities, as well as the slight paranormal element that this kind of lends to a story that is mainly, I would say, a gothic romance with maybe a little bit of a thriller element. It's hard to place it in a genre because I wouldn't call it fantasy romance, I wouldn't necessarily call it gothic romance. Supernatural thriller doesn't quite feel right, so it kind of teeters between all of these genres with a lot of elements of them. But if you are a sucker for some pining and a dark moody atmosphere, I feel like you'll really like The Whisper in Dark, and I gave it 4 stars. One that I have been excited to read for a long time, but it kind of got to the point where I felt like I'd missed the boat on it, I'd kind of outgrown it, is 1,000 Pieces of You by Claudia Gray. So this, I remember being so hyped on Bookstagram like over 10 years ago when I first had Instagram, and everybody was talking about this series. It's the first book in the Firebird trilogy, which is a sci-fi story about a girl whose father has been murdered, and her mother is this like world-class physicist who has created this device that allows people once again to travel through realities. And so the person who has been accused of her father's death is one of his prize students, like one of his research assistants. So the main character, along with another one of her father's research assistants, starts hopping through realities to try and hunt down his murderer and kill him. So this is quite a fast-paced, fun sci-fi. It has a romance element. It also has a little bit of a love triangle in here as well. And it starts like straight into it. Like, there is no messing around in here. The very first chapter opens up with our main character jumping into her new body in a new dimension, getting to grips with it, and then trying to like hunt down her father's murderer. What I really loved about this is the exploration once again of dimensions and the subtle differences, or not so subtle in some some cases, differences between realities. And I really like that exploration. It's that kind of thing that draws me towards stories like this. And this book did not disappoint in that regard. I did feel like the plot twist in here was a little bit obvious. I clocked it from like the second chapter because there was one character in here that was just so suspicious that I did not believe that his role in the plot was what the book was telling me that his role was. So I felt like I could see right through that at like 1,000 pieces, which didn't necessarily ruin my enjoyment, but it did, I feel, halt my immersion in this story a little bit. And overall, I ended up giving this one 3 stars. I really did enjoy it. There are so many elements of this that I did really enjoy. I just felt like it stayed very surface level for me, where I couldn't truly believe in the plot or get immersed or invested to a degree that I need to really love something. I would not be opposed to continuing on this series in the future, but I don't actually foresee myself going out of my way to pick up any of the sequels. So while it's one that I wouldn't say no to reading book 2, maybe reading book 3, knowing myself and how many other books I have to read, how many other series I'm in the middle of, I just think it's unlikely that I'm going to actively pursue this one and realistically ever get around to picking up those sequels. So it's one that I've not officially DNF'd. I'm open to continuing, but I just realistically don't think I'm going to. I also picked up a thriller, which was refreshing because it has been a long time, and this one was The Lies I Tell by Julie Clark. This one is the story of a con artist who goes through life manipulating everybody around her before she flees town, normally in possession of something that used to belong to somebody else. Our second perspective in here is a journalist called Kat, who knew this con artist or was aware of this con artist 10 years before the bulk of this story, and Kat perceives the con artist Meg to have taken something from her, and she would like to gain revenge on Meg for this. So this hops between timelines. We have the present day timeline, 10 years in the past that outlines the reason why Kat wants revenge on Meg. We also have a timeline that's 2 years in the past, which details another kind of con that Meg's pulled off, and also present day, where Meg is once again working another con, but she's returned to her hometown, and Kat is hoping to, like I said, get her revenge. Content warnings in here. It has a lot of portrayal of addiction. There's also an element of abuse, sexual abuse, grooming throughout here, because one of the first people that Meg cons, which we get into very quickly, is one of her teachers that was taken advantage of and abusing one of her classmates. And the whole, I guess, crux of this story, while I don't want to say too much because it is a thriller, is that the closer that Kat gets to Meg, the more she questions how much of a con artist Meg is and how much is a con and how much is real life. Now, I did really enjoy this one. I gave it 4 stars. When it comes to thrillers, I have a really irritating habit of being disappointed, and I call it a habit because it is me going into a book with unrealistic expectations. I speak about this frequently, but essentially every time I read a thriller, I expect it to be the twistiest, most intricate plot that I've ever read, and not all of them are going to be. Some thrillers are supposed to be really punchy, really dynamic, and they're supposed to blow your mind. Some are more slow explorations of like a character's psyche. Some of them are just supposed to be a fun, thrilling ride, and the plot twist is not the biggest deal in the story. But every time I read a thriller, I'm like, well, that could have been more salacious, that could have been more exciting, it could have been more intricate. And so I always leave feeling a little disappointed. So I feel like this was a 3.5 for me. It was a solid thriller. I enjoyed my time reading it. I support women's wrongs, so I had a good time, but it's not the best thriller that I ever read. With thrillers in me though, like I'm reading them for the ride, ironically, because I'm always complaining about the plot twists. Like I just want something outside of my usual genres that is going to take me away and absorb me and be really compelling for a short time, and then afterwards I tend to unhaul them because I'm never going to reread them, and it's just the experience of reading them for the short time that I do, which is why I keep returning to thrillers now and again. And the final book I read was my audiobook that I listened to throughout the month, and it was once again a 4-star. I had a really good time with this, and that is The September House by Carissa Orlando. I had heard some really good things about this, and it was the cover that drew me to it. I got this from the library because it's a horror. Horror and thriller is not really my genre, so I tend to either pick them up secondhand or borrow them from the library. And this one I just found really appealing based on the cover, and my library had it, so I thought I would give it a go. I picked up the audiobook on a whim, but I would recommend the audiobook for this. I'm very picky when it comes to audio, and I did really like this narration. But this truly is for fans of the murder house seasons of American Horror Story, because this is following an older couple. I would say they're at least in their late 40s. I would say probably their 50s, and they move into this house, and it's like a massive Victorian house, but they get it for such a good price. They're not people who've been especially affluent in their lives, and this is our main character's dream house. I think she's called Margaret, but they move in and everything is fine, everything's swell, they're in love with their house, and then September rolls around and the walls start bleeding, and then after the walls start bleeding, there's suspicious moaning everywhere. There's dead children hanging around in the corridors with like their entrails hanging out. Content warnings is it is a little bit gory, much gorier than I expected it to be actually. And Margaret and Hal have to very quickly come to the realization that their house is haunted. They both have very different responses to this. Margaret just starts to manage it. She starts to find workarounds and rules that she needs to follow to pacify the house until September is over. Meanwhile, Hal is growing more and more miserable. Now, this house isn't just haunted in September. It's actually haunted the entire year round, but most of the ghosts aren't malevolent, so Margaret is quite happy living alongside them, but it eventually gets too much for Hal and he leaves. So this is at the point where Margaret and Hal's daughter is starting to worry because she hasn't heard from her father and her mother isn't picking up the phone. So Catherine makes her way to her mother's house to try and locate her father, and sadly, it's September, so things are about to get real crazy, and Margaret is spending more and more time trying to control the house so that Catherine isn't aware of all of the strange happenings in there, while she is also investigating and searching for her father. Now, Margaret is aware that Hal has left. He told her that he was leaving, so she is unconcerned, but the more that Catherine digs into this situation, the more suspicious she gets. So I feel like that synopsis I gave was quite quirky, but this is quite dark. There is a lot of portrayal of domestic abuse, domestic violence in here. There is also addiction, forms quite a central theme of this one, as well as the gore. It's mainly the gore that surprised me because I don't read a ton of gory horror, so there was way more than I expected. We are following an unreliable narrator in here as well, because Margaret is trying to make the best of everything. She is obsessed with this house and she is determined that she is not going to leave, and so her portrayal of events is kind of like minimizing what's going on as she is trying to brush it under the rug as nothing so that she can continue to live in this home that she perceives to be her dream home, even as everything is crumbling around her. I have actually never, well, actually I probably have encountered a character that I hated more than Catherine, but Catherine was so annoying in here. The way that she kind of storms into her parents' house and starts behaving like child throwing a tantrum, which is actually something that Margaret says about her, was really, really irritating me. Like, I cannot imagine going to my parents' house and treating my parents and also the house that they live in with such disrespect. So she was truly boiling my blood and testing my patience throughout this. But I also feel like that really endears you to Margaret, even though the way that she is behaving in light of all of the things happening around her is not necessarily suspicious, but it's also very much not normal. I feel like the author, I don't know for sure, but I do feel like this was partially a love letter to the murder house seasons of American Horror Story, because so much of the way this plot unfolded reminded me of season 1, which is still my favorite season. I have rewatched it frequently, and I remember watching that at a time where television wasn't as like dramatic and shocking as we expect it to be now, and it like completely blew me away. I don't read a whole ton of horror, so my review, in my opinion, my review of horror doesn't hold that much weight, but I would say that this was a really good one. It was compelling, it was engaging, it was immersive, it made me feel a bit squicky because the gore was okay. It wasn't the most gross things that I've ever read, but it was definitely more bloody than I anticipated, so do be wary of that. But overall, like, I think it ticked all of the boxes for a good horror for me, and I'm really glad I read it, because when I picked this up I was going solely on the cover and I didn't actually know whether it was a thriller or a horror, but it definitely for me falls into the horror category. So here are the 6 books that I read in March. I'm still really happy with these actually. I guess I didn't realize when I was reading saying how many of these I really enjoyed, but it was such a good reading month for me for the quality of books read. Normally, I feel like I have mainly 3 stars, so to come away from the month with like 4 stars and a 5 is very unusual, but very much appreciated. Down in the comments, let me know if you've read any of these and what your thoughts were, but also let me know what your favorite book of March was, because I would love to hear. And if you guys would like to let me know that you were here but you don't feel like you have anything to say, please leave me a house emoji down in the comments for the September house. And I know earlier I not so covertly alluded to the fact that I've maybe read more than 6 books in March, which I definitely have, but do not fear, as all will be revealed very, very soon. But please don't forget to like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you wanna. If you head into my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, my Instagram and my Patreon if you'd like to join me on any of those. But that is it from me today, guys. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you'll go and nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.